Look closely at the glowing rectangle in your hand. The light spills out, a small altar to every passing whim and fleeting concern. It is an artifact that promises connection, yet often delivers only threads of anxiety. We are conditioned to live by these little heartbeats, the gentle chime, the immediate vibration. These notifications feel, at first glance, like signals of life lived fully, proof that we matter. But pause for a moment and ask yourself, does this number truly reflect your worth? Do those small alerts really map the contour of your inner peace? We have built an elaborate ecosystem around external validation, mistaking sheer quantity for quality of self. The scrolling becomes automatic, a restless neurological twitch, keeping us tethered to a constant stream of other people's curated moments and opinions. We dip into this digital well not out of genuine curiosity, but often out of dread, the fear that something crucial is happening without our knowledge. It creates a perpetual state of low-grade anticipation, a humming anxiety beneath the surface of everyday life. This anxious checking loop is perhaps the most modern manifestation of human insecurity. We are perpetually waiting for permission to feel okay, basing our mood and self-esteem on metrics designed purely for consumption. The scroll of endless notifications becomes less a tool and more a leash, subtly guiding our focus outwards, away from the steady rhythm of our own breath, and toward the restless murmur of the collective feed. It teaches us, through its very design, to care about things that are fundamentally ungraspable, the attention of strangers, the fleeting favor of an algorithm, the judgment captured in a single pixel. This ceaseless craving for acknowledgement is profoundly exhausting. Philosophically speaking, we have outsourced our emotional equilibrium. We hand over the keys to our inner citadel to devices that only ring when they want us to pay attention. To fall into this pattern is not merely a habit, it is a psychological compromise with the fleeting nature of digital existence. It requires a conscious and difficult rebellion. The first step toward finding true calm, toward reclaiming the art of indifference, is simply to become mindful of the source of your anxiety. When you feel the familiar urge to pick up the phone, or when that slight tension grips your shoulder just before opening an app, pause. Just stop. Do not engage the impulse immediately. Observe the feeling instead. Is it curiosity? Is it fear? Is it a vague sense of missing out? Many times, the answer is layered with anxiety dressed up as interest. This constant external stimulation teaches our minds to live in a state of reactive fullness. We mistake being busy for being meaningful. We confuse visibility with value. And when we finally learn to draw that invisible line, the boundary between what truly belongs to us and what belongs only to the world outside ourselves, then and only then can we begin to silence the internal ringing triggered by those endless streams of notifications. This radical act of non-reaction is where freedom begins. Think about the gaze of another person, the subtle shift in their posture, the quick flick of an eyelid that suggests judgment. It is a primal, unavoidable human experience to feel watched, to feel judged. We live our lives not just for ourselves, but as if we are constantly performing for some invisible audience. We navigate conversations by reading the micro-expressions on people's faces, calculating which words will earn favor and which might invoke distaste. This constant need for external validation is perhaps the greatest drain on the modern soul. It suggests a dangerous premise, that our value, our inherent worth, depends on the approval of others. If they smile, we feel validated. If their eyes glaze over, if the conversation stalls, we perceive it as a failure, a reflection of something lacking within us. It is an exhausting habit. To spend your mental energy anticipating disapproval, to rehearse perfect, witty retorts, or to curate every outing for maximum social credit. We build internal architectures based on fragile external consensus. And when that consensus fails, we feel the emotional reverberations, the sting of a slight, the disappointment of a missed connection, the quiet ache of indifference from someone we hoped would understand. In reality, most people are preoccupied with their own inner drama. They are more concerned with whether they remembered to buy milk, or if their colleague noticed the wrinkle in their shirt, than with the precise weight of your existence. Yet, we treat their casual regard as if it were divine judgment. We give too much gravity to fleeting glances and murmured opinions. The great mentors of old understood this deeply. They recognized that our emotional landscape is not defined by the comments others leave on our lives. It is defined by how we respond when those comments are absent or when they are openly hostile. Imagine, for a moment, severing that line, the invisible tether that connects your self-worth to their opinion. It feels unnatural, like forgetting an ingrained reflex. But the sensation of liberation that follows is profound. It is finding your own ground again, standing on solid earth rather than on shifting sands of approval. The Stoics gave us a tool for this kind of emotional weightlifting, understanding where you end and they begin. Their wisdom whispers that, while you can never control what another person thinks, that remains in the realm entirely beyond your power. You can absolutely control one thing: how much mental real estate you dedicate to their thought process. It is a practice of profound internal generosity, because it requires letting go of a right you didn't even know you were exercising. We assume that others should care about us. We expect them to be attentive, understanding, and validating. When they fall short of this expectation, which is almost always the case because everyone is struggling with their own messy, incomplete life, we suffer a genuine sense of betrayal. The challenge is thus not simply to ignore people, but to fundamentally change the relationship you have with their regard. To see it as data, neutral information about them and their current state, rather than a moral judgment about your character. Every time you find yourself mentally replaying a conversation, or dissecting a casual remark made by someone who walked past you 3 days ago, pause. Ask yourself, is this thought serving me? Does obsessing over the potential implications of that minor slight make my own internal world any calmer? The answer is almost certainly no. The burden we carry, the weight of external opinions, is not actually theirs. It is a narrative structure we have built for ourselves, assuming mutual emotional investment where none truly exists. To shed this weight is to realize that the only person whose opinion matters in defining your journey, celebrating your triumphs, and consoling your failures is the self looking back at you in quiet reflection. The goal is not cynicism or isolation. It is sovereignty. It is building a sturdy enough inner fortress that the casual judgment of passers-by cannot shake its foundations. It means learning to walk into an over-decorated cafe or sit across from someone whose opinion you know little about and feel your self-possession settle around you like a warm, familiar cloak. You are there for yourself. That is enough. We have spent time looking at the edges of our anxiety. We examined the pull of the screen and the exhausting weight of seeking external applause. But to truly find peace, we cannot simply avoid certain things. We must fundamentally change where we place our focus. Our minds are tireless architects, constantly building elaborate mental structures around what is important, or what we believe should be important. These structures are often made of assumptions. That if someone likes us, we are worthy. That if a job requires perfection, then worth depends on achievement. The problem with these assumed foundations is that the world outside is wildly unpredictable. It is a place of flux, chance encounters, and unpredictable indifference. And when our internal sense of self-worth relies on an unstable external foundation, everything feels like a precarious balancing act. The philosophy offers us not a vague reassurance, but a precise boundary. A line drawn in the sand, if you will. It is one of the most liberating intellectual concepts humanity has ever devised, the dichotomy of control. This concept, rooted deeply in Stoic thought, is perhaps the ultimate mental defense mechanism against modern overwhelm. At its heart lies a radical simplicity. There are things up to us, and there are things not up to us. This division is not merely an academic exercise. It is a path to internal sovereignty. Think for a moment about where your energy actually flows. How much of that frantic mental energy do you spend worrying about the past or anticipating the future? These realms are fertile ground for worry because they contain nothing solid to grip onto. We can only ever exist, intellectually and emotionally, in this very present second. This immediacy is both a profound blessing and a brutal challenge. Our minds prefer the drama of what if over the quiet reliability of what is. The Stoics understood that our suffering does not come from the events themselves, the traffic jam, the difficult boss, the harsh critique, but from our judgment about those events. The event itself is neutral data. It simply happens. What makes it painful is the story we immediately attach to it, the narrative that says, "This means I am failing," or "This proves that no one understands me." Here comes the core lesson, so clear and geometric that it seems almost absurd in the chaos of daily life. We must become ruthless editors of our own minds. We must draw that line. On one side, we place everything outside our personal domain. The economic fluctuations, other people's moods, the outcomes of a negotiation, the sudden downpour ruining plans. These things are handed to us by fortune, and they belong to the cosmos, not to us. On the other side, within this invisible boundary, we place only what is truly ours, our judgments, our intentions, and our responses. That is where freedom resides. Nothing external can touch a person who has fully mastered this internal distinction. The power belongs solely to the assent we give, the moment we decide whether or not to accept a thought as true enough to cause distress. We are responsible only for giving judgment, nothing more. This realization should feel enormously empowering, yet also profoundly difficult. It requires us to fundamentally distrust our own default settings. Our brains are wired for reaction. They want the immediate dopamine hit of fear, anger, or validation. The dichotomy demands a sustained moment of pause, a conscious refusal to react and instead asking, "Is this truly within my control?" The challenge is that modern life constantly begs us to forget this boundary. It bombards us with notifications requiring instant emotional investment. It frames every slight disagreement as a personal catastrophe demanding immediate defense. We are trained by culture, media, and our own expectations to treat the uncontrolled, the arbitrary actions of strangers or fate itself, as if they were moral failings on our part. Imagine the sand again. The line is steady. When external pressures rush in, a harsh word, a canceled flight, an unexpected failure, we instinctively try to paint over the line with frantic worry and defensiveness. It feels necessary, like we are protecting something fragile. But the philosophy teaches us that worrying about what cannot be controlled actually weakens the wall, making us susceptible to every passing gust of anxiety. The goal is not radical detachment. It is highly engaged participation coupled with profound mental self-limitation. We participate fully in life. We care deeply about our work, our friendships, and our goals. But we must carefully structure that caring so that the source of our happiness resides only within the sphere of choice. Our virtue, our effort, our readiness to act responsibly, those are the elements that matter. The applause, the resulting promotion, or even whether the friend understands us immediately, these are simply effects, useful maybe, but never sources of self-esteem. To truly live by this line drawn in sand is a daily practice of mental subtraction. It requires continually asking, am I stressing about something that will pass regardless of my will? Am I trying to fix the behavior of another person? Every time we catch ourselves lost in unnecessary worry about an external outcome, every time we feel the sting of judgment from someone who cannot possibly know the complexities of our internal struggle, we have a moment of rescue. We gently redirect. That is not mine to carry. This boundary doesn't negate emotion. It recalibrates it. It teaches us that grief can be for lost opportunities, the things that were up to us but we failed to act on. But it cannot be rooted in anger at other people because their choices are theirs alone. True emotional weight is carried only by our commitment to being the best version of ourselves, regardless of the applause or the criticism. The line remains drawn. It is not visible to the passerby. It is a masterpiece of self-governance, a covenant we make with ourselves. I will dedicate my energy only where it can generate change within me. And in that small circle of personal mastery, we discover an inexhaustible and quiet source of peace. We have learned to redirect our attention. We started by questioning the constant demands of digital validation and the exhausting burden of seeking external approval. We drew a clear line between what is ours, our inner judgment, and everything else that happens in the vast, indifferent current of life. But sometimes, even with this intellectual clarity, we get tripped up by something smaller, something tangible, yet deceptively potent. Objects. The philosophy often suggests detachment from people's fleeting opinions or volatile events. It is easier to argue against a person's harsh words than it is to dismantle the seductive allure of a perfect object. We find ourselves captivated not just by what we are told about, but by what we think possesses us, the perceived value radiating from material things. Look around you. Consider the items that surround us, the immaculate coffee cup bought for fleeting aesthetic pleasure, the gadget designed to solve a problem we barely knew we had, the fashionable piece of clothing that guarantees temporary belonging. Each object comes wrapped in a promise of joy, stability, or completion. We are taught that by acquiring enough of these things, we will finally achieve peace, or at least momentary happiness. The drama of possessions is perhaps one of modern life's cruelest illusions. It whispers to us that our internal state is merely a function of our external inventory. If the cup is beautiful, we are worthy. If the phone is updated, we are connected. This creates a powerful and almost unbreakable psychological addiction. We treat objects as if they hold curative power for the human soul. The Stoics were masters at seeing through this illusion. They did not merely advocate for minimalism, they advocated for radical self-sufficiency in joy itself. To value an object highly is to make yourself captive to its fragility. Every beautiful vase, every sleek piece of technology, exists under the shadow of entropy. It will eventually break, it will be discarded, or it will simply cease to matter as the fashion wheel turns. Our attachment thus becomes a dangerous form of emotional debt. Imagine that feeling of profound satisfaction when you finally achieve a major purchase. That surge of self-worth you feel, it is intoxicating, yes, but it is borrowed joy. It only lasts until the sheen dulls or the novelty wears off. And then, we are left with the weight of what was acquired, realizing that filling an empty space with things does not fill the emptiness inside. The root problem remains a failure of judgment. We confuse the external signifier, the beautiful object, with the internal source of contentment. We treat possessions as substitutes for virtue, believing that utility can somehow compensate for wisdom. This is perhaps the most passive and subtle form of caring. We care not just about what others think, but what stuff thinks of us. If our inner citadel, our true home, resides in our capacity to judge well and choose wisely, why do we constantly seek fortress walls built from glass, steel, and polished wood? Why does the temporary shine of a material good feel more compelling than the permanence of character? The philosophical exercise here is one of deep inventory. It requires us to look at a possession and ask a difficult question. What am I actually hoping this thing will fix about my life? Am I buying status, security, novelty, or perhaps just a momentary distraction from the internal echo chamber of anxiety? The realization that we are spending precious emotional energy defending material choices, deciding whether this cushion is soft enough, or if this jacket is stylish enough for the occasion, is startling. This expenditure is utterly disproportionate to any lasting gain. We must practice a radical indifference toward inventory, to recognize that while these objects may be useful tools in our modern life, they are not determinants of our existence or worth. They are mere passing accidents of matter. This detachment begins with a mental acknowledgement. I can appreciate the craftsmanship, yes. I can even utilize its function, but my peace is neither dependent upon its continued existence nor its perceived scarcity. My calm will not vanish if this cup shatters. It will simply continue to be me. By systematically challenging our attachment to things, the car we need, the clothes we must own, the gadget we cannot live without, we begin retraining a powerful muscle of non-attachment. We shift from wanting an object to merely appreciating its presence. This gentle resistance to materialism is not a deprivation. It is a profound liberation. It is the freeing up of emotional bandwidth that was previously spent worrying about depreciation or desirability. The objects around us are indifferent, much like fate and weather. They simply are. And our greatest freedom comes from accepting their indifference, turning their lack of inherent value back into our own source of unwavering strength. If we were to trace the current architecture of modern anxiety, it would inevitably lead us to the digital feed. We are confronted daily with a silent, persistent performance review broadcast directly onto our palms. Every scroll is not merely an act of passive browsing. It is a subtle emotional risk assessment. We navigate these grids seeking confirmation, validation points masquerading as simple arithmetic. The metric that dominates this landscape is perhaps the like. It appears to be nothing more than harmless digital applause, a mere numerical count, but we have unconsciously allowed it to become an incredibly potent substitute for genuine human connection or actual self-worth. Think about it. When was the last time you felt truly seen, not just acknowledged? We mistake these fleeting signals of approval for substantive evidence that we matter. This chase after validation is perhaps the most exhausting performance art of the 21st century. It forces us into a posture of perpetual exhibitionism, where our internal state becomes contingent on external measurements made by strangers. The Stoic path demands a fundamental questioning of this ritual. We must pause and ask ourselves, who has granted this power to a tiny glowing icon? And what happens when the applause stops? The lesson here is one of radical self-detachment from measurement. The like-button dilemma reveals that we have become addiction artists, mistaking sporadic praise for continuous intrinsic value. We are treating transient agreement as foundational support. When our sense of self begins to fluctuate with the tide of fleeting digital affirmation, we are living a life determined by borrowed consensus. This is a deep form of psychological bondage. This concept requires us to draw an intensely fine line in the sand, one that separates performance from being. The likes, the comments, the shares, these are not reflections of your inherent worth. They are simply receipts of attention. They are easily bought and discarded, much like the possessions we explored earlier, only these items are even less durable. They exist purely as data points. We must begin to treat this digital affirmation with the solemn disinterest that Epictetus preached regarding random chance or fickle fate. Just because a group of strangers decided today to appreciate your photo does not mean they have decreed your value for tomorrow or ever. To internalize this boundary is to pull the reins of your emotional life back from the algorithms. It means acknowledging that the worthiness of your soul cannot be aggregated into a single, satisfying number. The anxiety inherent in looking at these metrics flows from an underlying belief, the belief that if we fail to gather enough affirmation, we will diminish. We behave as if our emotional economy is dependent on this constant trickle of dopamine hits disguised as social proof. This mindset is inherently unstable and exhausting because it depends entirely upon the good graces and fickle moods of others. The remedy, therefore, is a deliberate retraining of focus. Instead of asking, "What will they think?" a question that instantly renders us vulnerable to external whim, we must start asking, "Is this action aligned with my internal principle?" We are shifting from seeking outward approval to upholding inner integrity. This requires immense discipline, because the technology itself is engineered to bypass our reasoned judgment and feed directly into our primal need for belonging. The modern mind craves belonging, and social media has weaponized that fundamental human desire. But genuine belonging is not found in consensus. It is forged through authenticity and endurance. It is built when you can speak your truth quietly, even if the digital crowd remains silent or dismissive. This quiet commitment to self is far more valuable than any sudden burst of applause. We must practice viewing these external metrics, the likes, the views, the little hearts, as simply what they are: transient pieces of data in a vast stream of human communication. They inform us about taste or momentary interest, but they tell us nothing definitive about our character, our capacity for love, or the fundamental solidity of our existence. To reclaim our internal citadel means learning to value the quiet hum of your own conviction over the loud roar of temporary digital approval. This is not cynicism, it is intellectual freedom. It is realizing that simply because we can check these numbers repeatedly does not mean we must. We have the power to withhold that engagement, and in withholding it, we reclaim precious mental energy previously spent on managing an imaginary committee of digital critics. This simple refusal acts as a profound act of self-respect, solidifying the boundary between who you truly are and what a glowing screen suggests that you should be. We spent much time learning to draw lines in the sand. We learned that some things, the tides of other people's opinions, the flashing notifications of fleeting praise, are not ours to command. Our energy is sacred, we must guard it fiercely. But drawing a line is merely an intellectual exercise if we do not understand what lies on either side. The Stoics did not advocate for simple resignation, they advocated for clarity of vision. To truly master ourselves, we must first become keenly aware of our inner terrain. We cannot manage what we do not measure. Think of your emotional life, not as a collection of events that simply happen to you, but as weather. You are not the weather itself. You are the enduring structure within which the weather blows through. Does a thunderstorm define your architecture? Never. The storm is merely passing through. We have spent chapters examining the places where modern life forces us to care too much. We looked at our phones, treating notifications as sacred measures of worth. We pondered the weight of a casual glance in public, mistaking others' passing opinions for fundamental judgments about who we are. We mapped out the unshakable boundary between what is truly up to us and everything else, the external tide of fate, possessions, and people's whims. And then we examined the addiction of metrics, finding that our self-esteem could not be monetized or counted in simple numbers. If these chapters are a journey toward mastery, Chapter 7 must serve as a practical training ground, a space where theory becomes muscle memory. This is about building something functional, durable, and utterly internal, the Stoic shield. We have spent weeks dismantling the great idols of modern life. We questioned our worth based on notifications. We separated ourselves from the judgment of strangers, and we learned to view possessions not as extensions of self, but as temporary accidents of matter. These lessons required a kind of radical mental effort, a continual pulling back, a steady resistance against the ingrained human habit of attachment. But philosophy is never meant to be a difficult task. It is a shift in attention. It must become natural, like breathing. If we understand what truly matters, where does that understanding take us? It leads us to the smallest, most overlooked gap in our day, the space between stimulus and response. This fractional moment, the pause button of consciousness, is not merely a useful trick. It is the entire arena of human freedom. This 3-second window is where we intercept fate. In modern life, we are trained for immediacy. We expect instant gratification, immediate emotional closure, and an immediate understanding of everything that happens around us. Our habits have programmed us to react reflexively. A critical email demands a defense. A polite glance requires immediate self-assessment. A disagreement triggers a defensive volley. We become machines built entirely on reaction time, neglecting the slower, deeper process of deliberation. The art we are discussing today is the discipline of not acting automatically. It is mastering that interstitial space, the quiet void before the torrent of impulse rushes out. Think of it as being a mental gatekeeper standing guard at the entrance to your core self. When something occurs, a slight, an unexpected delay, an irritating sound, your immediate instinct is to jump through the gap and respond fiercely. The Stoic path demands that you step back from the precipice. To practice this pause is nothing less than a radical act of sovereignty. It says, I recognize this event, but I refuse to be governed by it. It creates an essential barrier between the external chaos and your internal peace. When we are not reacting reflexively, we gain what Epictetus called proherses, our faculty of choice. We move from simply being swept away to choosing our course of action. How do we cultivate this moment? It feels artificial at first, like learning a complex dance when you only know how to stumble. But every pause strengthens the muscle of reflective judgment. Instead of letting your emotional circuit board fire off automatically, fear followed by anger, annoyance followed by defensiveness, you force a deliberate interruption. You are telling yourself, wait, before I speak or before I feel shame, I will notice. This initial practice is simple in concept but profound in execution. If you receive bad news, your first impulse might be distress and panic. The pause means that instead of allowing the spiral of worry to take hold, you stop, breathe, and simply identify the emotion. I feel distress right now. This naming alone diminishes its power over you. If someone cuts you off in traffic, the immediate reaction is rage. The paused response involves recognizing this person's carelessness affects themselves, their haste, and their poor planning. It does not necessitate my own emotional detonation. You allow the irritation to exist for a moment, acknowledge it, but then you consciously redirect your focus back onto your own internal state, choosing calm over combustion. It becomes a miniature philosophy played out in micro moments of daily life. Waiting in line at the checkout counter is a perfect gymnasium for this practice. Instead of scrolling through negative news or mentally reviewing past grievances, which only compounds the current irritation, you employ the pause button. You observe your breath, you notice the sounds around you, and you simply exist within that brief period of waiting without needing it to mean anything more than itself. We are reprogramming ancient habits with modern mindfulness. We teach our minds that an inconvenience, a slight disagreement, or a social rejection is merely data, information about external reality, and it carries no inherent power over the citadel you have built within yourself. The moment you can create that space between stimulus and response, you realize you possess a staggering degree of freedom. You are no longer merely reacting to life, you are choosing how to meet life. The pause button is not an escape from conflict, nor is it perpetual inaction. Quite the opposite. It is the gateway to intelligent action, action informed by wisdom, rather than governed by raw emotion. It transforms us from passengers tossed by the currents of external events into captains who choose their direction, one deliberate breath at a time. This capacity for pause, this internal gap of seconds, is where the true art of not caring, the sustainable living indifference, is practiced and mastered. It is your daily return to self-sovereignty. We have spent many chapters drawing lines. We drew a line between what is up to us and what is not. We focused on the fleeting opinions of others, the temporary nature of possessions, and the critical microseconds available in our own response. But so far, we have only dealt with people, objects, and moments. What happens when the boundaries vanish? When the boundary is not a person's glance or an item's value, but something vast, unimaginable, indifferent to the existence of man. The last chapters taught us that our internal sovereignty is robust enough to withstand the social chaos. It can survive the broken gadget and the unexpected critique. We learn to shield the self from these predictable sources of anxiety. But what about things that move too big a curtain? What about forces so massive, so indifferent, that they make human squabbles look like polite whispers in a drafty hall? We must now extend our focus beyond the interpersonal drama and the domestic anxieties. We must confront the uncontrollable cosmos. The initial instinct is panic. When confronted with the scale of genuine cosmic forces, a shifting global economy, deep climate shifts, tectonic plates moving, or even just the sheer, overwhelming inevitability of time itself, our minds instinctively retreat into tiny, manageable circles of worry. We try to construct little fortresses around our daily routines, perfect schedules, optimal savings rates, carefully managed relationships. But the cosmos refuses these boundaries. It is a wild, magnificent indifference. And this refusal challenges the fundamental comfort we have derived from the dichotomy of control. The stars do not care if you filed your taxes on time. The deep ocean does not regard your internal state. The relentless turning of seasons follows no personal schedule or emotional condition. This realization, that existence operates on a scale vastly beyond human concern, can be profoundly unsettling. It can induce a sense of dizzying insignificance, a kind of existential vertigo where all the careful work done in chapters 2 through 8 feels laughably small. We are trained, by culture and attention economics, to believe that life is fundamentally about us, that our emotional resonance should be reflected by the stability of our immediate environment. If things get difficult, if the market falls, if the weather becomes extreme, if geopolitical tides shift, we interpret it as a personal failure, a moral deficiency in ourselves, or perhaps even a cosmic slight. The ancient philosophers saw this tendency and identified a subtle, but catastrophic, error, confusing the indifferent reality with our own sphere of concern. The world does not function according to human feeling. Therefore, peace cannot be achieved by mastering the world, only by mastering our internal relationship to its indifference. The disciplined student of Stoicism must thus practice radical acceptance of magnitude. It means looking at a swirling hurricane or reading about centuries-long drought cycles and understanding that panic is simply an unnecessary intellectual addition, a neurotic should attach to what merely is. The goal here is not resignation, nor is it mere passivity. True Stoic indifference in the face of the cosmos is a potent energy. It is the understanding that if everything external, our infrastructure, our climate, the political stability of nations, can be subject to these overwhelming forces, then the only permanent, stable sanctuary must reside entirely within the continuous space between your thoughts. We shift from managing micro-anxieties, the late email, the slight judgment, to accepting macro-realities, entropy, deep time. This is where our inner citadel expands its walls, moving from protecting against people and things to accommodating the sheer scale of being itself. The self must learn to be small in proportion to the cosmos, yet infinitely large in its internal capacity for calm. The emotional cost of resisting cosmic reality is immense exhaustion. It forces us into an endless state of vigilance, constantly checking if the sky will change too fast, or if the economy will break our delicate routines. This overvigilance is its own form of suffering, a profound inability to accept enoughness in the face of magnificent uncertainty. The practice here is one of intellectual surrender mixed with muscular mental resistance. It requires us to sit with the immense void of what we cannot predict, be it the next political cycle or the next solar flare, and simply say, I accept that this state of flux exists. My peace does not depend on predictable weather patterns, stable currencies, or benign human nature. This acceptance is a profound act of mental liberation. It detoxifies our nervous system from the exhausting expectation of control. When we let go of the need to fix global problems through sheer willpower, and instead simply accept their natural unfolding, their indifferent flow, we reclaim an astonishing amount of psychic energy. This refined non-attachment, now expanded to include planetary-scale indifference, allows us finally to define what true freedom means. It is not merely being free from a difficult boss or financial worry. It is being unbound by the grand sweep of time and space itself. Our internal self becomes an island that floats effortlessly in the sea of constant cosmic flux, stable because its definition of enough has been stripped down to nothing more than its own unshakable character. The practice culminates not in a grandiose feeling of transcendental calm, but in a quiet habit, acknowledging the immense indifference surrounding you, and realizing that this magnificent lack of care from the universe is precisely what allows your small, careful inner life to maintain its sovereignty. We have journeyed far from the initial tremors of our modern anxieties. We learn to observe the phantom weights of external opinions, recognizing that most judgments are not arrows aimed at our true selves, but merely stray thoughts passing in the wind. We establish the critical boundary between what is up to us, our choices and our minds, and everything else. The the shifting sands of fortune, the whims of other people, or the fickle nature of global events. If our inner world was once a bustling marketplace, perpetually echoing with demands for validation and reacting wildly to every passing critique, we have begun to realize that it is something more durable. We are learning to build an inner citadel, not a fortress built with stones and mortar, but one constructed entirely from the quiet discipline of the mind. This citadel represents the deepest core of self-sufficiency. It is the understanding that despite the chaos outside, the impossible notifications, the relentless demands for performance, the sudden shifts in global stability, there exists an unshakable sanctuary within our own awareness. This space cannot be invaded by temporary anxieties or bought with superficial achievements. Its walls are built brick by patient brick, the brick of acceptance, the brick of choice, and the mortar of reflection. To build this citadel is not about becoming immune to life's inevitable suffering. It is about ensuring that where we stand when the blow lands, we do so on ground solid with self-knowledge. The key lesson here is profound and liberating. Resilience does not come from avoiding pain, but from recognizing that our reaction determines the nature of the pain itself. The outer world will always be dramatic. It promises fulfillment through accumulation, success through visibility, and peace through perfect consensus. These are magnificent illusions designed to keep us perpetually looking outward. The inner citadel is the radical act of turning away from those glittering distractions, the cupola of modern desire, and facing the steady quietude at the center of ourselves. Consider the impulse to check a notification or the reflexive need to respond immediately when confronted with disagreement. These are not merely habits. They are weaknesses in the foundations of the mind, points where our sovereignty is constantly leaked out into the volatile atmosphere of others' expectations. The citadel demands that we identify and seal every such fissure. This practice requires us to become meticulous architects of our attention. We must treat our judgments not as truths revealed by circumstance, but as hypotheses requiring careful scrutiny. Every worry about a future failure, every resentment over a past slight, every sudden surge of comparison, these are structural flaws we must identify and remove before they cause collapse. We realize that the mind is a master sculptor. If we continually hammer it with fear, judgment, and complaint, it will yield something jagged and fearful. But if we treat it instead as clay, gently molded by mindful pause and considered acceptance, it can achieve a breathtaking stillness. The work of maintaining this inner space is a lifelong discipline, less like building a solid wall and more like keeping a continuous vigil over the entrance. It means pausing in anger before speaking, taking one deliberate breath when fear whispers its worst scenarios, choosing thoughtful non-engagement when the world demands desperate participation. The citadel thrives not on grand victories or profound moments of revelation, but on the 1,000 tiny decisions to choose internal peace over external drama. It is found in the mundane act of observing a sunrise without needing it to match a perfect picture, or walking through a crowded street and feeling entirely undisturbed by the relentless flow of humanity. This constant focus inward, this pilgrimage back to the self, reclaims something far more valuable than all the metrics, possessions, and approvals combined. It reclaims your peace, which is fundamentally your own property. No law, no trend, and no person can ever strip it away from you once you know its true location. This deep work of reclaiming your inner space leads us not to an answer, but to a fundamental shift in posture, a gentle indifference toward the things that simply do not matter enough to rock your soul. It is not apathy, it is clarity. Indifference means knowing where your loyalties must lie. They belong only within the boundaries of your own reasoned self. Therefore, let us treat this inner life as our highest vocation. Let us remember that we are the steady structure amidst the flux. We are the calm at the center of the storm, finding power not by fighting the waves, but by knowing that the ocean's might cannot touch the solid ground upon which we stand. This is the quiet work of being fully present, anchored only to the virtue of simply being oneself, undeterred and complete enough in that simple reality. We have spent so much of our lives building walls around our worth. We built them using the bricks of external expectation, the likes, the perfect job title, the smooth conversation, the stable relationship. Throughout these chapters, we learn to dismantle those walls, understanding that true self-worth is not something earned by the world. It resides, rather, in a quiet state within ourselves. And more than just stopping negative thought patterns, there is an art to living gently, an art of not needing things to be different simply because they are inconvenient or challenging to our comfort. This gentle indifference is often misunderstood. We do not mean apathy. We are not advocating for giving up on life's joys or becoming emotionally inert observers from a distance. True indifference, the kind pursued by the deepest philosophers, is something far more active and profound than mere detachment. It is the capacity to be utterly present in reality, while simultaneously refusing to let that reality dictate our inner emotional state. It is understanding that life simply unfolds, with its magnificent flow of triumph and setback, pleasure and discomfort, without requiring our constant intervention or dramatic reaction. To reach this gentle indifference means having fully integrated the insights gained about control. It means accepting what we cannot change, the volatile economy, another person's mood, the relentless march of time, as simply being. These things are not hostile forces against us. They are simply facts of existence. Our challenge is to stop treating those facts as personal affronts. They often whisper to us in moments of quiet unease, "You should worry about it. If you don't react strongly enough, it means you don't care." But this is the grandest and most debilitating lie we tell ourselves. Emotional intensity has always been mistaken for moral engagement or genuine caring. But real self-mastery understands that profound care does not necessitate constant struggle. Sometimes, the deepest love requires a calm release. Time it to practice this gentle indifference. Consider a minor inconvenience today. Maybe you are delayed by traffic. Perhaps someone cuts you off in line, or a meal you were looking forward to is suddenly altered. Our natural reflex is frustration, a sharp burst of annoyance that ripples out and affects everyone around us. The goal here is not simply to endure it. The goal is to watch the irritation arrive, acknowledge its energy, and then let it pass without grasping it. I must teach you to observe your emotional reactions as if they were weather patterns passing through your mind. A sudden flurry of frustration, perhaps, that is merely an incoming wind. Acknowledging its existence without letting it buffet your core stability. You are the stable ground. The emotion is just the temporary cloud cover above it. This requires moving beyond intellectual assent to mere acceptance. Knowing intellectually that something outside our control will not hurt us is one thing. Allowing ourselves, emotionally, to be okay when we cannot stop a car accident or reverse a failed friendship is another entirely. This emotional spaciousness is where true freedom lies. The art of gentle indifference teaches us how to step back from the drama. It means observing the argument unfold without needing to win it. It means seeing a person acting irrationally and realizing that their actions, while perhaps painful or absurd to us, do not fundamentally challenge our internal peace. Their existence is separate from your self-worth. This shift in focus can feel quiet at first. Sometimes we mistake stillness for apathy, thinking if we stop caring, we lose the capacity for deep feeling altogether. But that is a profound miscalculation. When you are genuinely indifferent to outcomes, not because you do not value them, but because their loss or failure will not shatter your internal stability, you become far more capable of actualizing lasting joy. This piece allows us to participate in the world fully, but lightly. We engage with others from a place of completeness, not neediness. We give our attention and effort freely, knowing that the reception is merely an external variable, one that will not determine the value of the gift itself. We are giving from abundance, not from lack. The gentle indifference, then, is the ultimate realization that life is sustained by its continuous motion, the push and pull, the rise and fall. And our greatest mastery is to become the unperturbed point in the center of that motion. We accept the magnificent chaos of human existence not with resignation, but with a tranquil awareness. We are simply here. We observe. We exist. And in that simple act of non-resistance, amidst the constant barrage of things we think we must worry about, something far more resilient than inner peace emerges. Profound, quiet sovereignty. We have traveled far, from the overwhelming tide of external expectation to the quiet harbor of our own minds. We learned that emotional freedom does not come from solving big problems, but from mastering small moments, the art of non-caring. This understanding sounds counterintuitive, almost irresponsible at first. Indifference is often misread as apathy, a shrug of indifference toward what truly matters. But the Stoic concept we speak of is far richer than that. It is not about ceasing to care entirely, but about careful placement of our care. The objective here is selectivity. It is about discerning which concerns deserve the finite energy of our attention and where we must draw a gentle, yet firm, boundary line. We are taught to reserve our vital emotional reserves for what we genuinely control: our intent, our character, and our current action. Everything else, the judgment of the passerby, the arbitrary decline of the stock market, the perfect arrangement of another person's life, these things must be treated as merely passing sensory data, background noise that does not dictate the rhythm of our spirit. Think of non-caring not as a void, but as a careful choice. It is choosing to look at an experience and saying, "This is happening, I notice it, but my internal stability remains untouched." This requires practice. It means starting small, almost embarrassingly small. These are the micro moments of life where we can begin to rehearse radical acceptance. Consider a routine interaction, waiting in line for coffee. Before the philosophy student arrived at the counter, her friend paused and made a comment about the slow service. A natural reaction would be irritation, a spike of frustrated judgment that makes us wish time would simply speed up. That irritation is built on our internal story. This shouldn't take so long. The non-caring mind observes that thought instead. It acknowledges the desire for efficiency, recognizes the annoyance, but lets it float past like a leaf on a gentle stream. She can choose to refocus her attention outwards, the patterns of the tile floor, the geometry of the queue behind her, to anchor herself in the present physical moment rather than in the narrative of inconvenience. This is more than simply ignoring something. It is an active redirection of focus that preserves internal energy. When we stop needing a situation to validate our feelings or reflect our worth, we free ourselves to interact with people and circumstances from a place of grounded abundance. We give without expectation and receive without attached hope. This spaciousness is the core lesson of non-caring. We must apply this lens to the mundane annoyances that accumulate through a day. The slight perceived betrayal in a conversation, the carelessly placed object that costs us 5 minutes of effort, the mild frustration of technology failing at a critical moment. These small slights, the tiny pebbles thrown into our mental pond, have a vast cumulative effect. If we allow every ripple to deepen into a pool of resentment or worry, eventually the water becomes stagnant and heavy. The practice involves catching ourselves in those moments of reactive thought. The mind is a relentless machine for assigning importance, often inflating trifles into matters of life and death. When you feel that familiar tightening in your chest, that sudden urge to react, to point out the wrongness of something external, pause. Use that pause. Ask yourself, is this genuinely within my control? If not, then what is the most virtuous response I can give right now? The answer will usually point back inward. We are practicing to treat every judgment, whether it comes from our own internal critic or another person's external gaze, as merely an opinion, a fleeting wave of electrochemical activity. It has no inherent gravity. Therefore, we grant it none. We do not engage in the argument with the bad traffic, nor do we fight for the perfect response to every perceived slight. We simply accept that life is messy, unpredictable, and fundamentally indifferent to our desires. The greatest act of non-caring, therefore, is a deep, radical trust in one's own constitution. It is trusting your internal capacity for calm regardless of what happens outside the boundaries of your skin. It means knowing that even if everything around you feels chaotic, the economy falters, the weather turns brutal, or people disappoint us repeatedly, your self-sovereignty remains an intact monument within your mind. It asks nothing grand from you, just a moment of gentle recognition, recognizing that while we can choose our actions, we cannot choose the triggers, and accepting that this realization is itself enough to sustain peace for today. We have spent chapters examining the grand boundaries of our lives. We learned that we cannot control global currents, nor can we dictate the opinions of strangers. We found sanctuary in recognizing the solidity of our own minds, the inner citadel against external chaos. This journey taught us to approach life with a deliberate detachment, understanding that gentle indifference is not apathy, but rather an active state of being present without neediness. If non-caring means letting go of grand anxieties like career failures or relational drama, then the freedom found in less thought is something far more subtle. It concerns the accumulated mental detritus, the endless loops of rumination, the constant what if and if only. We spend so much energy constructing elaborate narratives about judgments that never even formed, fears for outcomes that will never arrive. Think back to the time you spent analyzing a casual text message, or the hours wasted running through conversations you had yesterday, replaying every minor misstep or poorly phrased word. This is where true mental poverty lies. It is not in what we possess, but in how much headspace we dedicate to rehearsing non-events. The Stoics understood this exhaustion well. They saw the human mind as a remarkably powerful machine, yet often one that runs on faulty fuel, the fuel of judgment about things far removed from the present moment. Our natural tendency is to keep adding emotional weight to abstract concepts, hypotheticals, perceived slights, and future anxieties. This constant back-and-forth thought pattern creates a profound energetic drain. It leaves us mentally depleted, exhausted by thinking about thinking itself. We become trapped in an echo chamber of our own making, where the imagined problems feel more real than the immediate reality. The weight of these unlived thoughts is heavier than any visible burden. The freedom found here is therefore not achieved through grand acts of will or radical philosophical theory. It begins with a simple act of cognitive pruning. It is about catching the thought midair, noticing its pattern, and choosing to dismiss it like unnecessary background noise. It requires us to treat our internal monologue not as sacred truth, but as mere data, raw, transient material passing through. When you catch yourself spiraling into a detailed reenactment of a minor argument from years ago, or building an entire novel around the ambiguity of someone else's silence, pause. Do not analyze the thought, simply observe it. A simple observation is enough to break the circuit. It is like noticing that the train whistle blew in your memory, but realizing no actual whistle exists. You are recognizing a pattern of worry, not an urgent call to action. This practice shifts us from being prisoners of our own narrative architecture to becoming observers of it. We transition from actively participating in every thought and feeling, the dread, the guilt, the longing, to viewing them as weather patterns passing through our awareness. They are there, they are loud, but they do not define the stability of who we fundamentally are. The great revelation is this: when you stop feeding the internal engine of speculation, all that energy does not vanish. It simply redirects itself. That massive reserve of emotional bandwidth, previously used to rehearse perceived slights or worry about tomorrow's inevitable inconveniences, becomes available for something far more vital, for simply inhabiting the present moment with fullness and awareness. This ability to let go of superfluous thought is the quietest, yet most powerful liberation imaginable. It allows us to move through life not reacting in a panic to an imagined slight or anticipating a disastrous future, but responding calmly to the reality that unfolds right before our eyes. The mastery we seek is therefore one of gentle mental discipline, the continuous, subtle art of noticing the thought and then consciously choosing silence instead. It is realizing that thoughts are merely electrical impulses firing in the brain. They are not inherently moral statements, nor prophecies of doom. They are simply echoes. This commitment to less thought liberates our emotional energy to fully engage with what truly matters. Human connection in its raw form, physical labor, focused attention on a craft, or simply observing the shift of light across a surface. It is choosing depth over breadth, the richness of one undivided moment over the superficial spread of endless rumination. The final journey back into self starts here, by recognizing that many of our greatest burdens are not cast by the world around us, but woven by the exquisite tapestry of our own unexamined minds. True freedom is found in the deliberate lightness of acceptance, the willingness to simply let thought pass, without attachment or judgment, like clouds drifting across an enormous, indifferent sky. That quiet space, that gentle cessation of unnecessary worry, that is where our true self resides, and where peace can finally take root. We have traveled a long road. We started by examining the subtle chains that bind us, the expectation of notifications, the fear of judgment from strangers, the siren call of possessing more things than we need. Throughout our journey, we learned to draw lines in the sand, distinguishing what is truly within our control from the endless torrent of external events. We practiced pausing before reacting, realizing that freedom does not come from changing the world around us, but from altering our relationship to it. The last great struggle has been with our own minds. Our thoughts are relentless rivers. They carry us back into old anxieties, rumination about conversations we had yesterday, and catastrophic planning for the challenges of tomorrow. We spend so much energy trying to control mental narratives that simply do not exist. We build entire dramas in the privacy of our consciousness, investing emotional weight into hypothetical scenarios or unspoken criticisms. Think of your mind not as a mirror reflecting reality, but as a workshop. And within this workshop, every thought is merely raw material. It can be beautiful and structured, or it can be messy and exhausting. Our task, then, is to become the mindful artisan, shaping our judgments rather than being shaped by them. For too long, we have treated the self-worth like a variable equation. If I achieve this, I will feel valued. If they approve of that, my peace will return. We built entire architectures of happiness based on outcomes outside our grasp. Career milestones, physical appearance, or even the collective agreement of our social circle. But wisdom whispers a far simpler truth. These external scaffolding elements are inherently unstable. They are temporary constructs, subject to change, loss, and unpredictable entropy. To build your foundation upon them is to ensure that every strong wind, every minor setback, will bring it all tumbling down into dust. And the resulting feeling of despair will convince you that you were nothing at all. If we accept this truth, then where must we place our focus? We must return all energy, all attention to a single point, the present moment. The only space in which life truly happens. It is not tomorrow's potential. It is this breath. It is the light touching the wall right now. It is the simple act of choosing kindness over impatience. This brings us to the quiet, profound realization of being enough. Not enough for someone else, and certainly not enough to achieve something grander tomorrow, but enough simply by existing in this moment with integrity. To be fully present means recognizing that your value is not earned through continuous effort, but inherent simply by being. This does not imply stagnation or complacency. Quite the opposite. Radical presence fuels a powerful, steady stream of action. When you are deeply rooted in right now, you act from a place of fullness, rather than from a desperate sense of lack. Your actions become less about proving something and more about simply manifesting goodness. The mastery we seek is therefore one of exquisite simplicity, the ability to receive life's inevitable challenges, the sudden frustration, the mundane inconvenience, the unexpected critique, without needing to dramatically react first. We acknowledge them, label them as just another passing event, like a cloud moving across a vast sky. They are temporary. You are the enduring sky. The practice of being enough right now is the most potent form of internal rebellion against modern stress. It requires us to consciously withdraw the self from the perpetual negotiation with the outside world. It means allowing yourself permission to pause, breathe, and rest in the fact that simply existing is sufficient. You do not need the perfect caption. You do not need the affirmation button. You do not need external validation to declare your life worthy. This deep realization, this unwavering commitment to the present moment as the locus of all worth, changes everything. It transforms our struggle from a desperate attempt at attainment into a gentle practice of reception. We move from demanding things to ourselves to allowing goodness to simply flow through us. The challenge now is not a spectacular feat or a grand philosophy. It is merely consistency. It is choosing the quiet path every time, the one that resists the urge to scroll deeper, to argue harder, or to anxiously predict the future. It is planting your feet firmly on the ground and realizing the stability of that contact. This simple realization is the true citadel we have spent these chapters rebuilding. Go forward not seeking perfection, but embracing sufficiency. Go forth not burdened by what was, nor anxious about what may be, but existing fully in the grace of this very second. For within this moment lies all the strength and quiet power you will ever need. We have explored the grand structures of self-sufficiency. We learned to shield our inner citadel from the storm of external opinions and the tide of fleeting material desires. We mastered the art of the pause, recognizing that between stimulus and response lies the entire spaciousness of freedom. But true philosophical mastery is not a dramatic victory or a single great realization. It is the accumulation of quiet moments. It is the gentle discipline of returning to yourself when you forget how. This final practice demands nothing monumental of you. No heroic action, no grand gesture. It simply asks for your attention in small things. The art of non-caring, as we define it now, is not a dramatic detachment that requires us to build walls around ourselves. Instead, think of it like learning how to breathe again. It should feel effortless and natural. It means recognizing the subtle moment when you start caring too much about something that simply does not matter. Perhaps today, it is the slight inconvenience of traffic slowing your journey, the unnecessary delay at a counter, or maybe it is an internal flicker of annoyance, a resentment building against yourself for having thought ill of something small. These moments are tiny tests of our accumulated wisdom. They are invitations to practice non-attachment. When these little ripples of anxiety appear, do not try to solve them or categorize them as good or bad. Simply observe them. Notice the physical sensation of the irritation in your chest or the quickened rhythm of judgment in your mind. These sensations are merely passing thoughts, like clouds drifting across a vast and unchanging sky. You are the sky itself. The practice is to become an internal spectator, to step back from the drama of immediate reaction and simply watch what passes through your awareness. Do not judge the thought that arrives. Merely note it, acknowledge its presence, and allow it to move onward. Consider this mental act of observation a profound redirection of energy. When we are consumed by worrying about traffic or someone else's careless comment, we are mentally reliving those events endlessly in our minds, performing unnecessary dramatic rehauls. We spend vital cognitive power on imagined suffering. The quiet practice is the disciplined refusal to engage in these loops. It is choosing mental silence over rumination. It is realizing that most of the stress we carry is not caused by what actually happens out there, but by the stories we tell ourselves about what happened. Imagine going through your day like this. You encounter a mistake, a dropped item, a canceled plan. Instead of letting a cascade of should-haves and what-ifs take over your mental landscape, you pause. You acknowledge the minor disappointment with simple acceptance. It was an event. It was disappointing, but it is not catastrophic to the fundamental structure of who you are. This recognition shifts the emotional weight from external accident back into your own internal capacity to process reality. The truly quiet art is noticing these small moments where we naturally fall back into worry. Perhaps late at night, as you prepare for rest, and a list of unaddressed worries surfaces. A work commitment, an old slight, a future uncertainty. Instead of grappling with the sheer weight of this accumulated self-concern, gently acknowledge that the concern belongs to the thinking part of your mind, not to your essential self. You are separate from the storm of thought. This is where the profound freedom settles in. To realize that your ability to respond thoughtfully and calmly does not depend on perfect circumstances or predictable outcomes. It depends only on this quiet, continuous vigilance, this willingness to choose observation over engagement. This acceptance of inconvenience becomes a profound form of strength. It proves that even when life presents its messy randomness, your core self remains untouched and intact. This is the continuous rhythm of being present enough to act gently, but not so attached to outcomes as to suffer deeply when things deviate from plan. To inhabit the world with an open hand, willing to receive its beauty, yet ready to release its disappointments without struggle. It is a gentle mastery, a daily return to balance. And in this steady practice of non-attachment, we finally find that true peace is not something external that must be acquired, but an inner state that is constantly revealed by the choice we make in small, unnoticed moments. The greatest lesson of all time is often found in quiet stillness. It resides beneath the noise of expectation and the clamor of immediate need. It simply asks, what if I were to let go? Just for a moment. What if I chose to be fully here, with nothing more than the present breath and everything perfectly enough? That choice, the decision to reside